Nancy, as you guys know, is a great artist. She just sold a piece of work, as we just heard. And she works in oil pastels. And I was just fascinated when I saw her work because I'd never seen such detail work with oil pastels. It's usually a very muscular material.
Right.
And she makes it look like it is like it's so malleable and mutable, and it's just extraordinary. And her background is incredibly broad and deep. She comes from a traditional background, studied in Italy, then went and worked in architecture as an architectural illustrator. So very detailed, very precise work there. And then took all of that and is now doing her work in, she works in more than just oil pastels, but she works in, that's one of her mediums. And the thing that I find super fascinating about Nancy and ironic is Nancy says, I don't know anything about the computer. I'm really terrible on it. And yet she has completely taught herself how to use Photoshop, which is like, it's like, there's no way you cannot know anything about the
And I'll have a
computer.
confession. I have my daughter sitting right next to me. Here she is,
Hi.
Christina.
MIT support.
Yeah, she may. Yeah, if I have a glitch, she'll know what to do.
So, can everyone see Nancy large right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I don't know what you guys are seeing, but if you click at the very top of your screen, you should be able to, oops, wait, I'm gonna go back to where I was, sorry. Well, regardless, I'm gonna let Nancy take over from here and, there you go.
Okay. Okay, I'll share my screen.
There you go.
And I'll start. Okay. This first slide is my biography, but I don't really need to have you read it because I'm going to be going through it as I talk anyway. I just wanted to say I really am grateful for this opportunity to share my work. I really haven't in the past. And I've also really enjoyed doing this slide presentation because it gave me the incentive to actually look back in my past and sort of discover things that have been a common interest for me since I've started doing artwork when I was in college. And that's that I've always been interested in portraying people, animals, and their settings and their narratives. So I was at UCLA for my undergraduate work. I was studying painting in the art department from 69 to 73. And at the time, there were really three strong movements going on in painting. One was photorealism, the other was minimalism and abstract expressionism. And but the professor that really influenced me the most was James Valerio, who was a photorealist painter. And the only reason I really was most influenced by him was he was a very engaging teacher. And also he taught us an approach to painting, which was accessible to us as new painting students. And that was to use photography as gathering information for your subject matter, and then how to transfer that information, photographic information, to our canvases. So I just really took to that. And he also introduced us to other, at the time, contemporary photorealist painters such as Richard Estes and Ralph Goings. In 1973, I got my Bachelor of Arts, and then I moved to Florence, Italy, where I studied at Villa Schifanoia, which was a branch of Rosary College, and I got my MFA there in 1976. While I was there, I was mostly influenced by just the art and architecture that was around me, not so much any professor, but I was particularly drawn to the art of the 1300s and 1400s, the late Gothic and early Renaissance, because I I just love the simplicity and directness and how they portrayed their narratives, which at that time, of course, were mostly biblical stories, sometimes Greek myths. And this is one that I particularly liked. It's a fresco by Maso de Banco. And they were just beginning to use one-point perspective. So in the past, in the 1200s, they had seen figures as just individual of the saints and the Virgin and the Christ figure. They had seen them as occupying each their own space. Whereas in the 1300s and 1400s, which is why I found this interesting, they started to understand one-point perspective and could create these like spatial settings where these narratives could take place. And then they'd also use the architecture to sort of section off. Pardon? They'd use the architecture to sort of section off parts of the narrative. Here is Saint Sylvester resurrecting the two magi killed by the dragon. So I kind of like the way he uses a column in this to section off the area where he's subduing the dragon. And then here in the middle, he's resurrecting the two dead magi. And then to the side are the onlookers. I just like the way that they kind of set up their compositions using architecture to show their narratives. I'm just showing a few of my work from graduate school days. Again, I like to draw scenes, and I didn't have any figures to pose for me. So outside of my etching studio, there was a rooftop, and cats would always be up there. So I just started taking pictures of cats, and I did these two etchings looking out of my etching studio. This was a self-portrait I did at the time, and I was in my painting studio, and I was looking in the closet, and there was a mirror, and the mirror reflected the garden in the background. So I had a background space and then a middle ground space where I was sitting, and in the foreground was the room closet. In 1979, I came home for 2 years. 1977, I was here 2 years. And then in 1979, I was working at a Bunkagaku, an English school in Beverly Hills, teaching English. And I met up with someone from Time Life Corporation, and they suggested working in Japan for Time Life Corporation part-time. And so I said yes. And so I moved to Tokyo, Japan. And at that time, I was just, I was working, it was part-time, it paid well, and I had extra time. So I would love to go to the Tokugawa Museum and the Goto Museum, and I learned a lot about Japanese art. And just like as in Italy, it mostly interested me, the paintings and woodblock prints of past centuries. They intrigued me, especially I like these long, they were called imaki. They're like long hand scrolls that showed narratives of either historic events or often landscapes, I don't show here, or novels. This was The Tale of Genji, which was a novel written by Murasaki Shibuki, was considered the first novel. And this shows, this narrative shows the life of Prince Genji and all his courtesans. And what again interested me, like in Italy, they used architecture to like set stages for their narratives. But what I found interesting, they take the roofs off the top, and they don't use perspective because it would be too confining to use one-point perspective in these long scrolls. These scrolls could be, I mean, this is just a tiny section of the scroll, could be hundreds of feet long, literally, telling these narratives. And I just found that kind of fascinating. Also, what interested me is they don't define any ground plane or background plane. There's no definitions. So the narratives sort of seem to float across space. And it also creates a lot of movement because these empty, as you know, Japanese art uses a lot of white empty space. And it tends to just have the figures and the action just sort of flow into that space. This was probably one of the most Western looking woodblock prints that I like from the Edo period by Utamoto. And again, I like the fact he's showing kind of a narrative of these courtesans that are all practicing the 4 accomplishments. And I like the way he, again, sections off the narrative in these 3 separate woodblock panels. And this one you see back here, there's a tea ceremony going on, and they're doing sumie, ink wash painting, and this one and this one. Here, I think this represents calligraphy, and back here, they're playing a musical instrument. When I was in Tokyo, I met a group of women that we were all interested in doing life drawing. So we'd meet and we'd pose for each other. And this is Mieko, my friend I did a drawing of. And I used this group of friends to do my artwork. And while I was in Tokyo, I actually started out studying woodblock printing with Toshi Yoshida, but it was really difficult. It's really tough. And I kind of, after 5 or 6 months, I decided to go back to doing etching, and I found an etching studio. So this is an etching that I did while I was there. And in this etching, I kind of wanted to show how you felt living in Tokyo, because the art, there's so much empty white space, and it's very much a part of Japanese composition, being more minimal in terms of how Westerns paint. But you live in Tokyo and there's like absolutely no empty space at all. It's very dense and congested with buildings, people, crowds. And so I kind of wanted to show, also the apartments are very small, and so I wanted to sort of show that in this etching. And also the other thing that interested me in Japan was that they're very eclectic in how they practice their beliefs and spirituality. They will follow traditions of both Shinto, which is the indigenous religion, and Buddhism simultaneously, and also sometimes aspects of Christianity. So in this etching, I used Mieko as my main figure, and she's sort of in a pose which could be taken as a saintly figure. This was a common clothes drying rack that they had in the apartment buildings there. So I put it up here to sort of allude to a halo. And I used a white pigeon to sort of allude to the dove, which represents the Holy Ghost in Western painting. Down here, this figure kneeling is kind of reminiscent of the Virgin Mary. If you look at paintings, Italian paintings or Western paintings of the crucifixion and the passion, she's often posed like this. Yeah, so I sort of thought, okay, it sort of has I guess it would be sort of a Christian take on it. Here, this little boy who's pointing to the figure in reverence to her is wearing a t-shirt with a little elephant on it. And that actually represents Ganesha, which is the Hindu god. It's usually represented in India as an elephant. And in Japan, there's certain sects of Buddhism that actually worship him. And there's 3 temples, I believe, there that are dedicated to him, but they won't show his image in Japan because he's too sacred. But anyway, I put him here to kind of represent that, that also as an aspect of their traditions. And then up here on the TV, this was an actual commercial that was on television when I was there with a little angel, which of course seems very Western. On the door here is a Tengu mask, which is a Shinto deity, and he protects the homes. And there were many homes where I saw people had this mask on their doors. This was in 79-81. I was there. Up on the top of the shelves this is a Butsudan, which is it's a little like a small Buddhist temple where the ancestors, the spirits of the dead ancestors reside. And a lot of homes when I lived in Japan had the Butsudan in their homes. Here is a print by Hokusai, which of course in his print shows all nature around. But in reality, back here in Tokyo, this is pretty much how you're experiencing Mount Fuji. There's not much nature, well, from that viewpoint anyway, from Tokyo. And again, I used like a Western composition, very symmetrical, which wouldn't be Japanese. And I used posts to sort of section off, just as I had really liked in the Trecento, Quattrocento painting in Italy, how they section off different areas of the narrative. And here the boy's pulling on the cat's tail. Here the woman inadvertently pours tea on the little baby. And here is out the balcony is this area. And here I put Clorox bleach and white cloths here representing purity. They used a lot of Western women at the time I was there in their advertising, their billboards. All this imagery I took from photographs that I took there. This was another etching I did in Tokyo. This was at Meiji Jingu. It was in a big garden, and I often went there just to take refuge from all the hecticness of the city and being in Tokyo, and these little turtles would climb on the logs. So I sat there with my etching plate and did an etching. In 1981, I came back from Japan and I had to get a job, a full-time job. So I got a job working for Carlos Denise Associates, which was a illustration firm that did architectural illustrations. And he had clients worldwide. He was quite a renowned architectural illustrator. And I worked for him for about a year and a half. He was a difficult man to work for. What I got out of that experience was I learned how to do geometric perspective projections working from architects' plans and elevations, which I had never really knew or understood how to do. And it also I learned a process to do an architectural illustration so that I could go into business for myself, which I did. So from 1984 to 1996, I did architectural illustration. And I'm just going to show you a few because it's sort of the highlight of that time. These I did for Gensler and Associates, who are an architectural firm. At the time, they were working for, their office had a lot of work, but the architects I worked with were working with John Peters, who was the co-chairman of what was then Columbia Studios in Culver City. And John Peters had this idea because they have, of course, huge film studios, sound and film studios there, and they filmed in. But he had this idea, well, if we put these facades in all these big film studios, which look like big warehouses, they could actually do filming outside as well as inside. So Gensler drew up plans and elevations for these facades. This was one. It's the Fuller Building, and it's exact copy of the Fuller Building that is located in New York City. It's an Art Deco building. It was designed by Walker and Gillette in 1928. And it's, of course, in New York, it's a high-rise building. And here, of course, they had to shorten it. It's down to 5 stories. That was the block out. And then I also did, I had to do studies. The landscape architects would often designate what they wanted in the landscaping. So I would do studies in ink before I did actually put in the foliage and trees and such in the illustration. Then after having completed the block out and all in the foreground with figures and planting, I would do an ink line drawing over, putting vellum over my block out and doing an ink line drawing of the project. Then I would take that ink line drawing to, I used Blair Graphics at the time, and they would do a big photo panel that took both water-based and oil-based paint. So then I would paint the foliage and all that in acrylic in the building, and then I would do the sky in oil paints. And these are just 2 other, these are views again on the studio lot. This was a thoroughfare, kind of neoclassical looking buildings. And this was another one that Sony had bought out Columbia Studios in 1989, but it took a while for them to change over. John Peters was still with them for a few years, but then Sony didn't want to continue with this project. So then in about 1997, big change. I got sort of disillusioned with doing architecture. Well, I wasn't disillusioned. It's just that there was the advent of computer 3D modeling programs that came about that could do all the perspective blockouts. So I wasn't needed for that anymore. So they started, just like the architects I worked for would just give me a already finished line drawing and say, okay, do the artwork over this. So it was kind of not that exciting anymore. And not to mention a lot of my billable time I couldn't bill, because a lot of that time, the majority of it was doing the perceptive block out. So I went back to school and I got my teaching credential for elementary school. And I taught at Hazeltine Elementary for 3 years, then Mar Vista Elementary School for the rest of my time, 17 years, 16, 17 years. And these are just some fun, a student did this. I had curly short hair at the time. A student did a little portrait of me. So I was going to say, but what I got from this, I was doing art all the time then, but for kids, you know, it's just all art, kid stuff. But what I loved teaching the most was art, of course, and creative writing. And my students were just like first and second graders, but they could grasp the elements, the three main elements of writing, which were, you know, characters. A story had to have characters, setting, and a plot. So I realized, looking back, that I just carried this on when I started doing my own work, because I started doing people in their setting with the architecture and their narratives. So that kind of carried into my work. I just was showing a few things I did when I was teaching. I didn't have a lot of time to do artwork, just summers. But one summer I was just playing around. I missed my tools that I'd done architectural illustration with, my French curves and my ellipse templates and my compass and all that. So I just came up with a watercolor, abstract watercolor painting. And I did just these other studies of fish that I did with colored pencils. Then another summer, I was Googling Earth, and I was really into Googling Earth that summer. And I was Googling around Mount Shasta, and I noticed that there was just all this development all the way up to the boundary with the national monument, and it was all development towns. I thought it was like the countryside was being devoured. So I superimposed this wolf over the image that I'd gotten off of Google Earth. And I did actually a pencil drawing. And then same process, I used an architectural illustration. I went and took it and had it reproduced on a big heavy paper that took watercolors, and I did watercolor over it. So this is west of Mount Shasta. And then on the east side of Mount Shasta, I think because it's hot out there and not as many people live out there, very few right there. So I superimpose these wolves that are peaceful, in the setting. And then in 2016, I retired from teaching, and since then, I finally, for the first time ever, have been able to just devote my time to doing my artwork full time. So I live close to the Venice boardwalk. I've always thought it fascinating down there with all the vendors and artisans and performers, all the colorful murals. Just seemed like the perfect place to find subject matter in terms of people and settings, in terms of backdrops and narratives. So I started taking a lot of photos there. And I do have a lot of digital work photo, but I'm not showing it. I also, of course, would get permission and started taking pictures of individuals and did portraits. Again, from this time on, I've just been working in oil pastels. And I use I'll show my process later, but I use little tortillon sort of to apply the color. I love this because it's an excuse to do this great beard and wool cap. This was a painter, very proud of his painting there. He was selling along the boardwalk. This is a balloon vendor. He dresses in a clown costume and he does balloon art for all the kids and tourists that are walking along the boardwalk. So he posed for this for me. And this is Ty, and he isn't there anymore. I met him just a few blocks off from the boardwalk, and for a living, he paints people's trailers. I haven't seen him in a while, so I don't know if he's had to move on, but anyway, so I did a portrait of him. This is a guitarist that always is down there talking, playing guitar. He doesn't have it with him now, but he's talking with a tourist, and he always wears these kind of fanciful headdress things that I'm sure he's created himself. Again, great beard. It's fun to draw him. This was a girl that was skateboarding by. She was a good opportunity because it made for a more dynamic composition, because often people are just kind of strolling along and they really aren't that intriguing, but she was kind of zipping by, and these men were kind of gawking at her from behind, so I caught them. And they were looking at her. And then I thought, when I did this, I thought there's a mural of this by Rip Kronk. It's huge down there near Windward Avenue it's taken from Sandro Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. Well, he makes her into a skateboard girl, Venus, but she's behind this figure and her skateboard is flying up there. So I put her in front of the Venus, the skateboard Venus, and then included the rest of course, Botticelli's painting, which are part of that mural. This was another girl that was down there, and I thought she was kind of fascinating because she looks very feminine, but she's very powerful at the same time. And I did this picture at the time when the Me Too hashtag was going on, and she had this tattoo that says, "We've always had it tough. We've always had enough." I thought that was kind of interesting. And she was in front of this really bright mural by of course, I enlarged it and kind of, changed it a bit, but by, I can't figure out his name, Mario A or something. But anyway, here were some other people walking by, and a man kind of admiring her, and she was sort of admiring the mural. This was another mural down there, and these interesting characters going by. This had been graffitied over. Again, another Birth of Venus. I actually changed out the Birth of Venus. She looked very much like this, but I took one from a 19th century painter, Alexander Cabanel, and I liked her better. And I also put his angels above just to add interest. Again, there's a little girl admiring the mural. This was another view down there. This behind here was just a big pile of junk covered with tarps, but I had collected a bunch of pictures of paintings. So I up and down the boardwalk, different artist paintings. And this man here sells his paintings. You don't see his are over here, but I just decided to assemble these and show the paintings. And this man here, I think the tourist sort of looks, kind of invites you in. And over here again is the balloon vendor. This another down there on the boardwalk. This is right near it's called something else, but it was called the Green Doctors. They sell medicinal marijuana. So I was right in front of there. All these were actually there, muck rock. All these paintings were on the wall, and these activities were going on. It's a very active day. There was like Beat the Bar, where if you hang on for 2 minutes, you get win $100. Of course, nobody can, so they're there doing this activity. And then here is a virtual reality activity going on. And I like the way I use this man with his T-shirt, so that this face on the T-shirt sort of invites you into the scene. And this was another one. This I did in front of the Venice Ale House. And again, I just sort of wait till interesting people walk by. I always go down there from about 3 to 5, so the light's consistent, and I go on a sunny day so I can accumulate information over some time to know which figures I want to include in the picture. Again, here, this is another guitarist who plays down there. He wears this kind of scary skeleton costume here. The balloon vendor, he's usually always there. Just onlookers, people going by. Oh, and this, I put a T-shirt was being sold on the boardwalk. I thought if this were just a black backpack, it wouldn't be inviting you into the scene. So I kind of superimposed that T-shirt on her backpack. And so I'm going to talk, a little bit about my process. The first thing, a lot of this comes from my way back to UCLA days, getting photographs. And then when I did architectural illustration, a lot of this my process comes from those past experiences. But what I do is I go down, I choose a setting. In this case, I decided on the Sidewalk Cafe and Bar in Small World Books. And I just shot a lot of pictures there. These aren't all of them. These are ones that I actually used to work from, but I make sure I have like my backdrop, my background scene. And I even go in and get close up because I like to show the people that are eating inside. So I get up and get close up to people I think are interesting in the restaurant. And then this is down in Venice, not on the boardwalk. It's a few blocks away, but it's a painting of a bull. Oh, I was here on a bulldog parade. I thought, wow, I came down here on a bulldog parade. That was kind of a lot of interesting things going on. But I thought, oh, he has to be in the picture because he's bulldog and he's big on a big wall with a door, corrugated wall. So I included him. And I get shadows and more people. And then of course I shot a lot of pictures of people with their dogs. And this guy was just interesting with his tattoo. I used him. These were all people that and their dogs who I ended up thinking would be interesting to use in my drawing. And here I was at the Hammer Museum and there was it's a painting by Toulouse-Lautrec, which he painted when he was 15 years old, of a bulldog. Got down on the board, but I thought, well, he needs to be in the picture too. So I included him, but everything else is from the boardwalk, the dogs going by. And this was a painting of a bulldog down on the boardwalk. I also take a lot of pictures of what I think I'm going to need, like trees, palm trees, pigeons, and what have you, that I think I'll include. I set up my setting. Where the spatial area that the narrative is going to take place. So here I have to I have to take out all the distortion using Photoshop of the photographs. And I like to play with the perspective, just like it's like there's one point perspective. I think of those long scrolls in Japan where they don't use a consistent perspective because it kind of doesn't work for when you have a long area. So I do the same. I kind of play with the perspective when I block these out. Then I decide on the figures I'm going to use, the dogs and figures, and I scale them so they're in the foreground or middle ground or background. So I do them next. I scale them. I isolate them in Photoshop. You have to take out all the space around them. I then decided that this guy, he was not inviting you into the scene. So I placed this one guy was going down. He had built this elaborate carriage for his bulldog. So I put him in the foreground. And here it's the whole thing put together. And I decided to put mullions here. Again, I like the idea of dividing up every little area with a different, sort of a different section of the narrative going on in each area. And also it's so big. This is 44 inches tall by 7 feet long. I knew I wasn't going to be able to work on it on that scale. So I cut it up into sections. I then take this photograph to crisp imaging and they do a large, they do a large print for me that then they also do in black and white. And then I divided it up, the black and white photograph, because I'm going to use the black and white photograph to trace off this onto my drawing paper to do my drawing. This is how I set up. I just, I tape I'm using heavyweight drawing paper, which I think is Strathmore. I tape it down to my masonite board, each section, and then center the photo and tape it around the photo area so it won't get dirty in the boundaries. And then I tape down at the top, I tape the photograph down so that I can flip it back. So when I trace the image onto my drawing paper, I can just flip the photo back and forth as I need to. And I always do registration marks because paper over time will shrink or change, and I want to be able to recenter the photo as I need to. This is my work area. I put the big image above my desk so I can refer to it for color. And then I have my board with my transfer sheets here, and I set that up, and then I start to transfer the drawing on, from the photo, I transfer the photo onto my drawing paper. And the way I do, I make my own transfer sheets. I used to use graphite, but it kind of messes up the oil pastel colors. So I just use oil pastels to make my transfer sheets. I use umber, which I have two tissues here. I'll totally fill the page with umber first, rub it in. Then I use Prussian blue over that and rub it in, then black lastly. So, and I rub that in. So I come up with one transfer sheet. It's very thick and heavy. With oil pastel, it's too heavy to work. It'll get blotchy if I use it. So I place the other sheet over it and rub it down so that when I pull them apart, I have one transfer sheet that has more pigment and the other that has lighter pigment. I rub them both in. And so you can't tell here, but this has a lot less pigment. I use this to trace off all the lighter tones in the drawing and really detailed areas. And I use the darker ones just for broad, dark areas that I can trace off the black areas. So here I am. I put the tracing, the transfer paper under the photo, and I use a 2H hard pencil to just go and trace off the image onto the drawing paper. And this is just, you can see a section of the of where I've traced off that main dog in the foreground. And then I mix my colors. I don't use pastel to the paper. I use them like paints, really. I chop them up. I use the large Sennelier oil pastels, and I mix my colors. I just chop off chunks with my palette knife, and then I mash them together with my palette knife, the colors in my fingers to mix my colors. And then I save them under cellophane so that they don't dry out right away. And I try to mix the colors that are going to go across all 4 panels because I want to be consistent with that. So I don't usually pre-mix this many colors, but in this case I did because I was going to be moving across 4 panels to do the drawing.
Hey.
Here, I'm going to show you a little video.
Come on. Boop, boop.
I've started adding the colors to my ground plane in my drawing using the light, medium tone, and dark tones that I already pre-mixed. I'm also, where I feel the colors need to be warmed up, are adding yellow, red, sometimes white, sometimes umber to the underlying part. I also add a lot of white where I feel it's needed. I use my fingers to apply the color. With tones, I mixed up, seem a little on the bluish side, so I've been adding a bit of yellow, red, white. I do a lot of color mixing right on the surface of the drawing. This is getting warmer and I'm happier with it. I think I probably mix as much on my drawing as I do pre-mixing colors, not more so. I use my fingers for the big broad areas. And when I get into little detailed areas or want to get up to edges that I want to be more careful about, I use tortillons, these tortillons. I have some always that are already sort of used, and then some new ones for whites. And I also, when I've got enough pigment on my paper, I use color shapers. I mostly use the small color shaper, especially to get in when I start to do features and details in my figures and animals. I will often use this small color shaper the most. It's a bit sturdier than the white ones. The white ones tend to be softer, like for spreading out colors, and the darker ones are firmer. So depending on my needs, I have a choice of tools to pick from. So I will use this just to show how. I'll get up to little, closer into little edges where I want to be a little bit more careful. Eventually all the colors will be mixed and blended together, but I am a little careful to begin with that I don't lose my lines that indicate where I'm going to be drawing. Just continue this way. First finishing the ground plane on all 4 panels, and then moving on to the other colors that go across all 4 panels. Here, showing. I don't have any music or anything to go along with this. Oh, it didn't. Okay. Wait, I'm gonna go back. So this is the just showing the finished face of the dog. And then this, I finished this panel, actually since finished 2 others. And these are the 4 panel. I've finished 3 of them, and I just have 1 to go. And this one's the one I have left. So, yeah. So that's it. That's the end of my slideshow.
And Nancy, that is unbelievable. That is just amazing.
Well, will you frame these? Those 4, do they get framed? Because looks
Yeah,
like
they're
there's
gonna
one
be
that typed up. Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna be really big. I've been debating, I would like to get them framed, but I'm debating, you know, the tricky thing with oil pastels is you have to put glass over them, obviously, because they collect dust. But I want them to be, you know, that you have to have a thick mat so that the glass doesn't touch the oil pastel. So it's so big, a large one. So I'm gonna have to talk to my framer and see if there's some way. Maybe I could put like a mat with like little strips running down between them or something. I'm not sure how I'll do it. It's kind of a challenge.
You know, framers also can do spacers
Yes.
between your work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so think about spacers.
Okay. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that. So that's a good idea. Yeah.
It's almost like a shadow box.
Okay. Yeah, that would work.
Right.
That would work. Yeah.
Arlene, can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you're taking pictures of all those people, do you have to get their written permission? And
You know, I
like the
into
small
that.
bookstore, do you have to get the manager's permission?
You know, I've looked into that, and if you are taking a picture and you're standing on public space and what you're photographing is in public space, it's okay. You can't take a picture of a person like in their home if they're in their private space and you're outside, but if they're both on public space, you can take a picture. And the other thing I looked into is that if you turn it in, if it's a photograph, no, you know, it's a little trickier, but even then you could show it. But if you're turning it into an oil pastel or any kind of art, it's okay. Lawfully you can do that. I always get, you know, people that I do close-ups of, like I showed, I always get their permission. But people just walking by, I don't, obviously. They're walking by, and you know, they do look like themselves a lot. But I do, you know, I do change. Like that girl that, you know, the one that the Me Too hashtag girl, I did change her a bit, you know. So I mean, she probably think I think that's me, but they're not identical to the person.
Well, this is amazing. I remember looking at your work at the house party last year and thinking how beautiful it was. And I just am amazed at watching your process. It's just blows my mind.
Oh, thank
And
you.
Yes.
one other question I had for you, I worked with pastels a lot, but I gave them up because they're so messy. But are the oil pastels less messy? Do they have less of the dust that comes up?
Well, you know, the way I use them, they're not. I really, quite honestly, I've never been able to draw with them successfully. Even the smaller oil pastels are too big and rounded. And as you can see, I do a lot of really small detailed work. So they don't work for me that way. That's why I use them. I literally, if you look at it looks like I have a palette. And I literally pick up a little bit of the pigment with those little tortillons that you saw me use. So that
Yeah, that was fascinating. I was just fascinated watching that. That's really brilliant idea.
How long,
Nancy,
how long does something like this take you?
Gosh. Well, the one that's in the show that sold me 9 months, but it's also because, you know, it's not like every day I can sit down and do this all day long. You know, things in life come up, you travel, you see your family, your friends, all that kind of thing. This is going to take me a long time. I mean, you know, I did the slide presentation. My husband and I are going away on a trip, so I'll get back, that kind of thing. But yeah, these take me a long time. Fortunately, you know, I'm retired now and I don't have to worry about, you know, income in terms of selling my artwork or anything like that. So that's kind of nice. It's really very nice, actually.
I noticed.
Nancy,
I
I'm
noticed
wondering,
go ahead.
Nancy, I'm wondering about the earlier etchings. Are those dry point or soft ground or
No, they're with
acid?
the ground. There were hard grounds at that time. The grounds have really changed. I tried taking an etching course a couple of years ago now, but the grounds are real different. A lot of things are different. But it used to be a really hard ground that then I used to use, you know, the etching needle and just, you know, you just etch out where the lines are going to be, which are going to be black. And then, you know, you put after you've etched out over the ground, you put it in acid. And depending on how deep you want the grooves to be, you leave it in the acid for a little time if you want light lines, more time in the acid if you want darker lines and such. I haven't done etchings in a long time. It's very different now. And what I didn't like about the grounds now is they're not real solid. I could carry my etching plates around with me and they wouldn't scratch or nothing would happen to them. Now the ground is, you can easily, at least in my experience, you can easily rub something off or I was kind of disappointed that it had changed so much.
So you weren't using aquatint or anything?
No.
Okay.
did you mention any spray finish or something to protect the painting after?
The oil pastels, I did. I used a spray finish once on earlier, and I was really unhappy the way it looked. It looked all shiny. So I stopped I thought, well, maybe I don't know how to use the spray correctly, but it just didn't look nice. It looked kind of shiny and plasticky like. So now I don't spray them. I save them under tissue paper, you know, acid-free tissue paper until if I get something framed, then I take it to the framer and I just tell them, you know, you're going to have to be real careful because they're not, you know, they'll collect dust. Once I had to have the framer redo one because they let it stand, it had collected dust, which you really see in the black areas. I had to have
And is there And is there glass on the frame when you frame them?
There's
Okay.
they're mounted on a board, and then over that they put a mat that's pretty thick and beveled so that the glass then goes on top of that, so the glass
Right,
doesn't hit
The
the oil
spacers.
pastel. Yeah, they're spacers.
Nancy, your Japanese work resonated with me, and I'm wondering if you've ever thought about having these panels, individual panels, made into a screen, like a foldable screen,
Interesting.
or if that would work. Just seems like it would just be so beautiful to have those images.
Immersive.
Yeah.
Like the Van Gogh and all of that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that. I remember those.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. You said they're what? How tall are they again?
This
96.
This last one is 44 inches high, and it's about the 14 about 7 feet long.
4 by 7.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have, obviously it's not going to work if you have to frame them with glass to protect them and stuff, but maybe, an image that you could get and put on a screen. I just think that would be lovely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could get a photographic image and do something like that.
Yeah.
That would be a possibility.
Is it possible to put resin over these? I mean, technically I don't know because I don't work with either.
Yeah, I really don't know.
Because that would protect them without.
I quite honestly,
resin doesn't do well with oils.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, resin does not stick well to oil.
Okay, then that wouldn't work. No. I
Mm.
like painting in oil paint. So the reason I stopped is just because of having to clean my, what I like about oil pastels, because my days are always broken up, interruption, that kind of thing. I can just leave it, go wash my hands and be done. I don't have to wash brushes. I don't have dirty solvent I have to figure out what to do with, because I really did like oil painting and better with brushes. But it's when you don't have long periods of consistent time to work, this is handy because I can just come back and forth, and whenever I have time, if I have a half hour, I can sit down and work for a half hour, which I find convenient.
It looks like the one on the left isn't quite complete. Is that? So you've been working right to left.
I never know how I'm going to work. The only thing I do is I do work left to right on a panel, just because I don't want to smudge over what I've already done. So I'll work, across left to right so that my hand isn't going over what I've just drawn. But in terms of all the panel, I went across, like with each color, I did all the colors that go across, I did all across all 4 panels right off, because I want there to be consistency across all. But then when I went in to do the details, like the people and the dogs, I would just focus on that one panel. I did first finish that one, then this one, this and this one. Now I've still got that one to do.
Question, Nancy. So how would you classify the medium? Like if you were to enter your art, would that be collage with pastel, or?
It's kind of interesting. No, just oil pastel. I mean, I do a collage in Photoshop. So when I have digital, I call it digital work.
Digital.
I would
Okay.
just
Under
call
digital medium.
I don't know what I would call it, just digital work. I mean, I guess you assume when it's in Photoshop, you can put all kinds of things together.
Yeah.
But for this, I wouldn't call it collage, just because it's just one single image that I then draw from.
That's true.
But the Photoshop part definitely is collage. I'm putting together different things when I do the Photoshop part of it, which is actually one of, I don't want to say, maybe the most creative part of it when it comes down to it. It's the Photoshop part is when I'm creating the scene. I'm just taking things and collecting information and creating the scene. But then I love the process of obviously drawing, because it's just getting the rich color and stuff on there is very rewarding. Because some people said, well, why not just leave it a Photoshop? And I have left a lot of my things just as a Photoshop. I haven't shown them, but I think, this works fine as a Photoshop, and I'll just leave it that way. But this one, like all this in here, in that funny carriage part, this was all just black. I had to lighten it to see details. So when I draw, I do change quite a lot when I'm drawing, bring out certain parts and other parts I don't, and that kind of thing.
So Nancy, I
Beautiful.
to say, I mean, the work is beautiful and congratulations on your sale. These 4 pieces, have you thought about maybe approaching Lois Lambert for a one-woman show?
I haven't. I read about her. I actually was
Very open
surprised I
to
got
it.
in because I had read they usually show abstract art.
No, not necessarily. I mean, since you sold a piece there, she might be really open to your having a one-woman show with
Digital work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
you
I
should.
can try that, yeah. Yeah, I have one goal really. I hope I can make this goal is that all these people and places are the boardwalk, and I've always thought it'd be nice to have a show down there, or where people actually go, oh, I remember that place or that, because as you know, things constantly are changing down there, and even a lot of these people that they're like that one guitarist, I don't really see him much. I don't know if he's gone. You just sort of like to show a time, so it'd be kind of not. Oh, I mean, Bergamot Station, I guess, is close enough to Venice. That would
Yeah,
work.
I think it would be. I think it would resonate with her if you had enough pieces and just showing her these 4. I mean,
Right.
if I were Lois Lambert, I would jump at it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
obviously,
I'd like to show them all. I'd like to show them all just because they're all about that place and those people.
Yeah.
They're all consistently about that area. And so I'd like to. It'd be nice to see them all together. But I just haven't had that opportunity, or I haven't really sought it yet, but it'd be kind of nice to do that.
Yes, I think there's probably other galleries down there as well that would consider it, even if Lois doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But usually if you have if she's successful and obviously there's a client that bought your work, that would be a good incentive.
Yes. Yeah, I could ask her, right, and see if she would be interested. It would be nice. It would be close by. I live 5 minutes away, and and Venice is close by. So
I think the work is extraordinary, and it's definitely at the level of or higher than many of the artworks that I see at galleries at Bergamot, and particularly hers. So,
oh, thank you. And yeah, it's been fun. I had really not been kind of for years until I joined Women Painters West. I've just been putting my work in the drawer. my husband said, "Oh, no, show this work," and he was the one that encouraged me to join Women Painters West. He said, "You should, other people, it'd be nice if they could see your work." So, yeah, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to do that.
Congrats, Nancy. Beautiful and very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Thank you so
Absolutely
much.
amazing.
Yeah, great presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can I?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if I was still on mute. Hi, I am an admirer of your work as well. And this is Buena Johnson. And I spoke with you at the Lois Lambert Gallery. I was just flabbergasted at your beautiful work.
Okay.
My question is, how do you get your lettering so exact in your artwork, in your background, all the lettering, the buildings, the lighting?
It's really hard.
I've tried to do lettering before, and it's quite a task.
It is. It's really like when I get to the lettering and think, oh, it's really. So I use that little color shaper to get up to the edges, but it takes so long. I also have a set of Faber-Castell colored pencils. And if I can match the color of the around the letter pretty closely, what I'll do is I'll put the oil pastel there, but I kind of push it up to the edges with the colored pencil that kind of matches that color. Because the lettering is really, really hard. Also doing little faces of people that are really tiny in the background is tough, you know. It can, but the thing that's really nice about oil pastels, you know, if you blow it, you just take my palette and I scrape it off and start in again, which is what I like about them. That's why I never really kept with watercolor, because I couldn't fix. I mean, that people that do them say, oh yes, you can, but I never could really fix things I wasn't happy with very well. But with these, they're flexible in that way, and I like that about them.
Nancy, did the oil pastels ever completely dry?
No, and you know what I don't know about is that the dark colors do. I don't know why, but that, you know, those transfer sheets I do with the umber, Prussian blue, and black, I can put those on, and also a little bit depends on the weather, but they dry really pretty quickly. But then any lighter colors, especially white stays tacky forever. I can get oil pastels out of the drawer that I did years ago, and all the whites and lighter colors are still tacky to the touch. So I don't know what the chemistry is or whatever, but the dark colors do dry, which is handy because I can do kind of that under traced part with the dark colors and then work right over them, and they don't muddy up my my drawing.
Can you use a drawing medium with them, like a gal kid?
No, I've never used anything. I've heard you can, but I never have. I've never used any medium with them. I just mash them up and, you know, just with my little tortillons. Sometimes I've thought, I mean, I might experiment sometime because they are oil based. I was thinking maybe mineral spirits or something, you could thin them out, but I've never really needed to do that for what I do.
So fun. Anyone else have any other questions?
Nancy.